Hospital Porter's pride and dignity stopped the New World Order. Welcome to Admirable TV and welcome to this UFO Disclosure 2023. It's actually almost 10 days actually since David Grusch came out and gave his testimony. So I thought I'd do another little update. I wasn't actually expecting to do one right now. I wasn't expecting to do this video right now. I was going to maybe do one at the weekend when there'd be more to say. I thought there'd probably be some more news by then. But unfortunately, I will need to do another one now, just 2 days after the last one, because, well, there's a lot more that's happened. A lot more that's happened. David Grusch, he's sticking by his story. He's still working with a lot of people, and working hard with sensible people like Leslie Kane, George Knapp, etc. He's still in touch with those people. He hasn't denounced anything. He hasn't apologized. He hasn't gone back on a single thing he said. Still standing firm. So, well, as I said before, you know, David Grusch, good guy, all-round good guy. If you're watching, David, I salute you. Kudos to you, mate. Really, really well. You may well have changed the world. So, well, what have I got for you? What have I got for you? So, what's happened since the last UFO disclosure video on this subject? Which is like, this subject seems to be taking over everything I do, like Balloon Gate and Object Gate, except it's lasted longer. Well, more than I expected, which is why I'm making this video. Well, basically, we've got kind of it's kind of what's in the last 2 days. We've kind of had the good, the bad, and the ugly, more or less. So perhaps we should get the ugly out of the way, shouldn't we? So the ugly is this. The Daily Star from yesterday. I'm going to take my glasses off. It's actually, I find it easier to read things on paper without my glasses, actually. The Daily Star for yesterday, Tuesday, June the 13th. It looks like the David Grusch story has finally hit the headlines, except not in the way I hoped it would. The reason I haven't got like I haven't got the background on at the moment is because things like this tend to blur and fade out when I hold them up. So let's have a look at this. Is the headlines. This is how I mean, talk about a chain breaking at its weakest link. This is the Daily Star here, and it says here here we are. It says #1 for ecclesiastical spaceship shenanigans. Ugh. UFO crash hushed up by the Pope. And you have a picture here of, it says here, former intelligence officer insists Europe's first ever downed spaceship was recovered in Italy in the 1930s, but God's right-hand man covered up the whole shebang. And you have the UFO here crashed in the woods, and there is the Hollywood alien ET, the extraterrestrial, wearing a mitre. Yes. No, it doesn't look good, does it? Well, let's go into the article before I get. I mean, of course, most people who read these kinds of newspapers, if you can call it reading, generally just read the headlines and then they put it to one side. We are going to go into the article and see if that's any better. I mean, it'll be interesting to read. I mean, I say read. The British Red Tops, incidentally, they're specially designed to have a reading age of a 10-year-old, even though they're aimed at adults. So. Just says a lot. The kind of education we get in this country and the kind of people they're trying to appeal to. Okay, so I'll just read through this article here by Jerry Lawton. A UFO that I'll do my Daily Star voice. A UFO that crashed in Italy almost 100 years ago. It's actually 90 years ago, not 100. Was hushed up by none other than the Pope, says an ex-US Air Force intelligence chief. ET phone Rome. ET phone Rome. Full story, page 5. Right, so let's skip through what we got here. I'll sort of skip through these. We got the various scandal stories, weather. There's some tits on page 3, of course. And here we go. Right, so this is page 5. Okay. Thou shalt not hush up crashed alien craft, father. All right. Right next, of course, a very clickbaity picture. Pope link man for US spooks. The Pope helped cover up a UFO crash, according to an ex-US intelligence officer. David Grusch, 36, has alleged the US government secretly kept debris from crashed UFOs so it could reverse engineer the pieces to create new high-tech weapons. Well, he did say that was its purpose, and things that's what you'd expect. That's what you'd expect, definitely. Of course, Italy wanted to do that as well. The idea of using extraterrestrial in technology and maybe trying to take advantage of it is nothing new. It goes right back, probably to Mussolini's RS-33. Here we go. Now he has claimed the first UFO to crash land on Earth came down 90 years ago, and they got it right that time, in Italy, and the Vatican was involved in covering it up. Well, yeah, that's actually not the first time. Let's face it, that's not the first time that the Vatican has actually been accused in that way, is it? It's the Vatican gets accused of all kinds of cover-ups and all kinds of conspiracies, including UFO ones, and many others. Remember Pei Due, if you recall that, and you know the assassination of Pope John Paul I, and well, there's some much more horrible things involving children buried in the cemeteries and things like that in the Vatican, things like that. But yeah, they get accused of all kinds of shenanigans, to quote that newspaper. All right, so here we go. Okay, so where was I? Yeah. Grusch, an ex-staffer at the Defense Department's National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, that's a big word, said the Pope Pius XII acted as a go-between during World War II to ensure the craft was moved from Italy to the US. He said 1933 was the first recovery in Europe in Magenta, Italy. Right, that may not have been the first recovery, but that was the first one. Well, there have been rumors of others, but actually, maybe it was the first one in Europe. I mean, the last one we know of, the first one we know of in the world is 1897 in the United States, Aurora, Texas. They recovered a partially intact vehicle, and the Italian government moved it to a secure airbase in Italy until around 1944 or 1945. The Pope, that's right, that was when Italy was invaded. Italy was invaded, and the Mussolini regime was destroyed. If you ever watched the film Saving Private Ryan, that's what that's all about. The Pope back-channeled, this is in quoting again, the Pope back-channeled that and told the Americans what the Italians had. All right, so, and we ended up scooping it, says Grusch. Well, actually, it's quite likely the invading Americans would have found it. I mean, they had no trouble in Germany. I mean, if you know your history, you'll know that between 1944 and 1945, Germany and Italy were invaded and occupied, and they were plundered ruthlessly by the victorious Allies in World War II. You've heard of Project Paperclip. That's a very well-known part of history, which involved Germany specifically, which involved the transfer of technology to the Allies and wealth and lots of money was taken, including incidentally the money and jewels and property owned by concentration camp victims. They keep very quiet about that, don't they? Yeah, you know, I have unconventional views on history, as you know, and this included scientists like Werner von Braun and many others. Some ended up working for the Soviet Union, some for Britain. America got most of them. Some of them worked under fake identities. Now, one of them, incidentally, was called. This is a bit of an aside now. One of them was called Dr. Brian Greene. He was transferred in 1945 to the United States and worked there as a psychologist. Do you know what his real name was? Yeah, Dr. Joseph Mengele, the Butcher of Belsen. Yeah. Infamous person, carried out live human experimentation on he had an infinite supply of non-consensual human guinea pigs in the form of concentration camp inmates, and and never faced justice, was given a cozy job and a home in the US. So. Well, anyway, I don't want to get angry about things. Basically, this is no surprise to me, and they kept it quiet, of course. And the fact that the Vatican was involved, again, pretty much what you'd expect. What's now we've got now? Okay. Asked if the Catholic Church was aware of non-human existence, of not on Earth, of just on non-human existence on Earth, he replied, "Certainly, of course, I'm sure they do. I mean, they've probably known about it for a while. Do you think that the material in the Library of Alexandria didn't have some information about aliens, the stuff that was stolen, and then the library was destroyed?" The Vatican has not responded to our request for a comment last night. All right. So the Daily Star phones up the Pope. Says, "Excuse me, Francis, mate. I just want to have a word, Dick." All right. The Star says, page 6. Okay, we've got an editorial now. So I turn over the page like this, and we have this here. So that's that story. Going to give you another look at that story there. Oh, right. Incidentally, these photographs. So there's some photographs here. 2 photographs to illustrate this. Now, this is rather strange because these are UFO photographs. They're nothing to do with what's involved here. They're nothing to do with the incident we're talking about. That there is the one of the McMinnville photographs, quite famous one there, maybe real. And that there is the Charlton incident, which is something that happened, I think I think it's about 1960 in Wiltshire, and where something allegedly came down in a potato field near Charlton. Here we go, in Charlton in Wiltshire. Right, here we go. Right. The Star says, extra time for Pope. Right, here we go. It's not the first time the Pope has been accused of being a bit misleading. Just read any of Dan Brown's novels. But it's not hard to be shocked at the claims that back in the 1930s, with the Pontiff helped cover up a UFO crash landing. Well, it's not really shocking for me, but yeah, according to a former US intelligence veteran, Pius XII was key in helping smuggle a mystery craft out of Italy to America. He even apparently confirmed the existence of aliens in a conversation with the Yanks. So this is, yeah, so the Pope actually literally got, when the Americans invaded, he literally got on the blower and told them where it was. So he must have known where it was. Mussolini must have told him. Interestingly, Mussolini didn't share this with his Axis ally Adolf Hitler, because the Germans didn't know anything about this, apparently. That most popes managed to get through their papacies by praying, reading mass, and generally inspiring 1.3 billion Catholics. Pius had to not only be extra celestial, but down with the extraterrestrials too. Oh, that's a terrible pun. That's a terrible pun, about what I'd expect. Anyway, that is the Daily Star out of the way. Oh dear, I could always... Don't know what I'm going to do with this now. Keep it as a souvenir. I don't know. I might actually keep it, this paper, and see, just in case there's another lockdown and we run out of toilet paper. Mind you, you can't really use this as toilet paper, can you? You wipe more on than you wipe off. So that's the ugly out of the way. Now, good. There's some good stuff here. There is some good. Let's put my glasses back on because I'm back to the screen. I very much recommend Weaponized. Weaponized have done a new episode. This is on Jeremy Corbell's channel. This is the show he does quite regularly with George Knapp. Now, some of these are better than others. Some of these are completely irrelevant. Like, there's some which are just about like friends of theirs in the music industry and things like that, and the music and movie industry. But excuse me. This is the late episode 21. It's quite a new show. Confessions of a UFO Insider. The David Grusch Revelations. Now, this contains a lot of very interesting information, and some of it is new.
Explain why I'm so excited.
I won't go into this. In detail, but you can. Yeah, there it is. You can just go and watch it there. There's the URL. So I won't go into details particularly. I can now. I'll put my background on now. By the way. I won't go I won't go through the actual program. I'll just give a brief summary. What should I have? Yeah, I'll just have that. I think. There we go. That'll do, won't it? My studio area. But the reason it's so thrilling is because he talks a lot about the Inspector General. He talks a lot about the lawyers representing David Grusch. Apparently, they've been joined by someone very effectively. Now, what's happened is that there was a bit of confusion. It actually came up during that debate with Ross, well, if you call it that debate with Ross Coulthart and Mick West, in which Coulthart basically it was Coulthard 5, West 0, as my comment said underneath. Because Coulthart said that the lawyers had dropped him. What actually happened is that the solicitor representing Grusch has resigned and is now representing him independently. Now that is quite extraordinary, because that means this is a guy who is a former intelligence community inspector general, who then became an independent solicitor and then started representing Grusch. The law firm now wants him out. They want nothing to do with him. And so his own solicitor said, okay, I will quit the law firm and I will act for him independently. If that's the case, this is a guy who's absolute conviction in what his client wants, and badly wants to continue the case, continue when his own law firm told him just to dismiss the case and leave it. If that's true, that's not confirmed yet. That's just what Corbell just said on here. If it's confirmed, then it's a very, very interesting, and I think a very, very significant development. Very significant indeed. Someone on Twitter said this, actually, if I can find it. Someone on Twitter. I'll play the clip anyway. As usual, this is me looking for things on Twitter when I haven't already put them down in my notes. I'm sure I retweeted this. I'm sure I did. I'm sure I retweeted this. Here we go. Oh, I did. Thank goodness for that. It's not going to be the usual fiddling and faffing around I normally get. Here we go. This is just a clip from that particular show here, tweeted by Mark VR. Important. If, as Knapp and Corbell per Grusch, the former Inspector General of the U.S. intelligence community is leaving their law firm and is now representing Mr. Grusch personally, this is a stunning development. So let's just hear what he has to say, shall we? Let's put some.
Because the lawyer who represented him to Dave, that law firm represents whistleblowers and active duty government employees. Dave is no longer a government employee. He left. And so the firm that would normally represent him has been peeled off. However, to suggest that it's somehow this big split, that they don't believe him, is completely wrong, because the lawyer who represented him all the way through this, the guy who used to be with the IG's office, is still representing him. He's peeled off from the firm and is still sticking with Dave.
Yeah, that's the mistake that Mick West made, if you remember the debate with Ross Coulthart.
We're talking about the former Inspector General of Intelligence. Yeah. So what you're telling me and what I'm telling you and what we know to be fact is that this individual is leaving their law firm to privately, because of faith and belief and trust and righteousness, to be right there next to Dave.
I can imagine what it's been like the last week for that law firm to be pounded and hounded by media from all over the world, not only reporters and producers and demands for interviews, but also all the UFO crazies who have been pounding them with criticisms and questions. And
yes, my ears are burning, George.
Things of that sort. So I'm sure that representing somebody who is now as high profile as Dave is a headache for him. So they might use the excuse, well, he doesn't work for the government anymore, we're leaving him. But the lawyer who's known him the best, who's worked with him through this whole process, is sticking with him because he knows Dave is a legitimate guy and he's going to have his back, as we will.
How about that? Well, there you go. That is a remarkable development. It really is. Now, that's the good out of the way. Now we have to get on to the bad, but the way to deal with bad is to address it and neutralize it. I've got two sources here. One of them is pretty predictable. The other is less so. I think it's rather disappointing. So we'll do that one first. And it is, unfortunately, Jordan Sather. Now, Jordan Sather, I've been watching him for a long time, actually, because he's a ufologist and a conspiracy theorist, but he's one more like me than most people in ufology. Now, what you see, ufology, including conspiratorial ufologists, there's kind of an image, isn't there, that has appeared. There's kind of an image that's associated with them now. Now, How do I explain this? Because they spend so much time talking about UFOs. You wonder there is a subtext to them which goes into more general politics and things like that. And the subtext is that these people are generally what you call centre-left, liberal, pro NATO, anti-Putin. The pandemic was the V word for the pandemic is okay. Things like that. I think that's and of course I think the perfect example of this is Steve Bassett. And as you know, when I interview Steve, he often goes off onto tangents that I don't agree with. He brings things up like Ukraine, and he brings up the C word pandemic. And a lot of you are yelling at me saying, Ben, why don't you disagree with on this? Why don't you tell him? Why don't you tell him you disagree with these things? And the reason is, of course, because I'm not here to debate these. I'm here to talk to him about UFOs. If I launch a conversation where we disagree about Ukraine or about the C word, then we spend 20 minutes on a subject that neither of us really came together to discuss. That's why. And it's really sad. It's really sad because Need to Know. Now, some of you I think may be familiar with Need to Know. It's in fact, I've got one open here. I was going to go. I've got something else good to talk. It's actually on this channel here. Need to Know. Because before I get on to Jordan Sather, I'll mention Tucker Carlson. Here we go. This is Need to Know. This is Ross and Bryce Zabel's show. It's Ross there and Bryce Zabel. They also have their own weekly show or regular show called Need to Know. The only time they discuss any subject that's not UFO related, it's Ukraine, and it's the typical NATO line. It's Ukraine good, Russia bad. Ukraine good, Russia bad, that sort of thing. So that's what I'm kind of talking about here. And but he has. Before I carry on, I know I'm sort of like inserting something I wanted to bring up earlier into this particular conversation, but I will do a recap in a minute. But I do want to talk about Tucker Carlson, so you should be able to see. Now, let me just play Tucker Carlson's little talk here. So it's very, very good. And Ross and Bryce have put this here, which means even though they have this political stance, they're not opposed to someone who is more like me. He's into ufology, but he's more sort of like right wing, I suppose. So here we are.
Not only are the media not interested in any of this, they are actively hostile to anybody who is. In journalism, curiosity is the gravest crime. Yesterday, for example, a former Air Force officer who worked for years in military intelligence came forward as a whistleblower to reveal that the U.S. government has physical evidence of crashed non-human-made aircraft, as well as the bodies of the pilots who flew those aircraft. The Pentagon has spent decades studying these otherworldly remains in order to build more technologically advanced weapons systems. Okay, that's what the former intel officer revealed, and it was clear he was telling the truth. In other words, UFOs are actually real, and apparently so is extraterrestrial life. Now we know. In a normal country, this news would qualify as a bombshell, the story of the millennium.
Well, unfortunately, normal countries, it does. You mean in a good country, Tucker? In a good country.
But in our country, it doesn't. The whistleblower's account ran on a technology website called The Debrief, which you've probably never heard of.
Well,
the Washington Post had that story, but decided not to run it. The New York Times, meanwhile, just pretended it never happened.
Well, they pretended it never happened, and they wrote a stupid hit piece, which I talked about on a previous video. I am familiar with The Debrief because it has so many really good UFO and conspiratorial articles.
Front page of the New York Times website this morning, there were 5 stories about Ukraine, as well as 4 stories apiece about Donald Trump, trans people, and climate change, the usual lineup. There was nothing at all about how an alien species is flying hypersonic aircraft over our cities. Not one word.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Yeah, I mean, there is now. This is the sad irony. He obviously made that little video before this thing here appeared. There is a word now, but unfortunately it's this. See, I wish, I suppose this is progress of sorts. I accept this is progress of sorts, except I would like to see it covered in the mainstream media, but I'd like to see it covered more seriously and in a more intellectual journal. Put it that way. That's just what I want to see. By the way, before we go any further, I know I keep backtracking here. I want to take another look at the place at Ponte Vecchio. Ponte Vecchio. I love Italian's a beautiful language, isn't it? Ponte Vecchio. Magenta, Italy. And here we go, Magenta, Italy. All right. I was having a look at it earlier. It's the cutest little place imaginable. Here we go. Here's Ponte Vecchio. Can you see that? There we go. I just want to, I just want to take another look around it because it's a place that probably hasn't changed much since this happened. And I keep let's show you a little street scene here. It's like it's a really it's the kind of place you see in like little. It's a sort of really cute. Look at this. It's sort of really like oldie worldy, isn't it? And you have these like little houses here with shutters. You expect to see old guys with berets and things, don't you? It reminds me of parts of southern France, actually. It does. Isn't it lovely? These are old buildings. This probably they say, look at this. You get a little alleyway here now. Go down here. This has probably not changed much, actually. There's an old church, you see. And I went back to what I did was I sort of went back to the overhead view and I started looking around here, seeing if there's any signs in the area from above that something strange had happened. Because as you know, if you remember my videos on the Nottinghamshire Roswell, I did indeed discover strange discolorated. Well, I didn't discover it, actually. Sorry. The ufologists, the local ufologists, Nigel Crowley and Daniel Bostock, they discovered it. But these guys did discover strange marks on the ground, which indicated something weird had happened there. So I'm looking here over this this beautiful Lombard landscape. It's just farmers' fields and things like that. Beautiful flat countryside here. I found something up here. There's some places there's like gaps in the woods in certain areas. Of course, this is really a long shot because there's many reasons why a wood might have little gaps in. Here's one here. There's a little clearing there, but you can't get a street view. This is the closest street view you can get. Isn't it lovely? But I just wonder, is that it there? Where there's these little clearings, because that's often a sign that something happened in the woods. If there's an unexpected clearing, it could be a sign that something happened in those woods. Let's have a look. Something happened in those woods. Something was taken away, and they had to cut down some trees to do it. That's certainly the case with Nottinghamshire, isn't it? Right. You see, it's a bit of a long shot, isn't it? But it's a lovely location anyway. It's a very nice location. It's just a pleasure just to look at those pictures of it, because it's a lovely traditional Lombard village in the beautiful Italian countryside. But yeah, it's a bit of a. I don't know exactly where in Ponte Vecchio it actually came down. There's no, Pinotti's article doesn't give any details on that. But I mean, I do think that article, The Fascist UFO Files, is absolutely definitive, and it contains the kind of documents and things that a lot of other articles on this subject don't. So there is good. That's the good and the ugly. Now let's continue with the bad. Now, Jordan Sather, as I said, I know what brought me onto this subject is that, of course, Jordan Sather is. He's not one of these. He's not a sort of centre-left liberal, and just talks about UFOs, and apart from that, he's sort of a Bidenista pro-V word kind of person, like most people in the UFO community are, how you almost expect it to be. I mean, Jordan was actually, he spoke at Contact in the Desert, and then they sort of pretended to lose his recording. This was a couple of years ago, and pretended they couldn't find his recording for the official channel. Luckily, somebody made a bootleg recording of it and gave it to Jordan. So you should always be happy if people do that. You never know when you might need a spare recording. But the reason is because he's a ufologist more like me, and he's a conspiratorial ufologist, but he understands that he doesn't go along with this idea like Stephen Bassett does, that, well, yes, the government are covering up his massive secret about UFOs. and they've gone to enormous lengths for decades, possibly longer, to keep the secret from us. But when it comes to everything else, they're telling the truth. Bryce Sable actually once wrote a very annoying article. Actually, it was called "Why UFOs and 9/11 Conspiracies Don't Mix," where he explained, he said basically that if you believe in UFOs, you shouldn't talk about 9/11 truth, because it discredits ufology. Funnily enough, when I was a member of the local 9/11 Truth group a few years ago, the guy who led it was someone I never really got on with. He said exactly the same thing to me from the opposite perspective. Because when I was going to do an address, he says, "Ben, just stick to 9/11. Don't bring up UFOs. It just discredits us." So he had exactly the same idea from the opposite side. I believe these things are connected, and we should discuss them in a holistic manner. And so does Jordan Sather. Jordan Sather is also very open-minded about other things, such as the 17th letter, like me, and he does believe that Trump is different to other politicians, as do I. Hence the hat. Oh, so where am I? That hat there. Where is it? This side. See, that hat I've got there. I got that hat for a reason. Make America great again. Yeah. So this is now Jordan. The problem is with Jordan, though, he's changed. When this David Grusch story broke, he made a video which really disappointed and surprised me, and it made me clear that he's now, since this has happened, he's turned into something of a backslapper. So I'll just play the video and I'll stop it at certain points and go into it. This is fair use, of course, like I've always said.
All right, so it looks like we have the next stage of this mainstream UFO disclosure op coming into play. And to introduce you to the next stage of this big old grand psyop we've been seeing in the media the past 5 or 6 years.
It's not a psyop. This is what I mean. He should know better than this. I mean, he's the one who understands the 17th letter, right? He understands Trump's different. So if Trump is different, why shouldn't this be different? Why shouldn't whoever's behind Trump have taken over the truth embargo and want to end it? Why is it, which I pointed out with the Department of Defense, why is it the DOD seems to be operating independently from the White House now? Remember Karine Jean-Pierre? Oh, don't ask me that question, ask the DOD, that sort of thing. So now he said, oh, no, it's a PSYOP, it's been running for a number of years, including, even though it started during the Trump administration. I'll let him carry on.
Years, right? Ever since the New York Times. Remember, it was December 2017 that the New York Times ran their 2 articles about a secret UFO program, UAP, blah, blah, blah. That was December 2017. And that was pretty much the Kickstarter to get this UFO disclosure ball rolling in the mainstream sphere. So it's been like 6 years now, right?
That's a good point. Yes, it was. And I think that's something that's a good thing. That's a good thing. And indeed, that's kind of that's not when the whole UFO disclosure thing started. That goes back to the beginning of the modern UFO era in the late 1940s. But it is it kind of was a big turning point.
Math, 5.5 years.
Yeah.
Of mainstream media, UFO disclosure, distraction. That's one of the goals behind it, right? Distraction.
It's always, backslappers always say this. It's either a psyop or it's distraction. It's either a psyop because it's meant to be messing with our heads for something and for some purpose other than, what it appears to be. That is the disclosure of UFOs. But the backslapper never explains exactly why or what that is. He just says, "Oh, it's a distraction from something. It's a psyop about something. It's a psyop to serve some purpose that I can't explain because I don't know what it is." It's annoying. And Jordan, I expect better from Jordan, to be honest.
Limited hangout. It's a huge limited hangout, so they're only admitting to us bits and pieces.
Yeah, that's true. And but it's every time I've actually addressed this point myself. It's a limited hangout sometimes, and I think, well, okay, it's going to stop now, and that's going to be the end of it. And then something else happens. It's just something is pushing it forward. This is why this is my idea that it's some kind of theater we're looking at here, some kind of positive mind control, as I've described before. They are literally dripping ideas into the community, into our heads, into culture, into group mass psychology, so that we'll be ready for more. Now, I don't think that's the right way to do it. That's not what happens in my book. This book here, Oh, I didn't. Have I mentioned I've written a book? Yeah, Roswell Rising, a novel of disclosure, available at all good bookshops now. Never mentioned that before. Nah. But it's how they've chosen to do it.
through Congress,
Yeah,
through
but
the
sorry, but it's not. It's not because of anything sinister. These are the good guys. These are the white hats. This is the 17th letter, Jordan.
mainstream media, through documentaries on Netflix, right, and all the other people talking about it. So limited hangout means that they admit bits and pieces of the truth, brush the more important bits and pieces under the rug. For instance,
Not under the rug. They're waiting in the wings, Jordan. They're waiting in the wings. It's like theater. The actors enter and exit.
in like New York Times articles, Politico articles, media reporting on the subject, they'll say, "Oh my gosh, we're seeing these craft. Look at these black and white videos. Oh my gosh." But there's no way that American defense contractors, the American government, military, we don't have anything like this. Nope, not ours. Our black projects haven't done anything with this technology. So it's got to be China, Russia, or aliens. That's a big tell.
Yeah, but it's actually not. It's actually true in this circumstances because I mean, as I've explained before, I know very well there is a secret space program that has anti-gravity vehicles. I've watched Dr. Stephen Greer's videos, new program, new film, as I've explained. Oh, by the way, I'm not going to be discussing Greer's latest press conferences. I'll leave that for now. It's too much in that to go into. I might come back to that later. But the idea that this somehow explains all UAP is nonsense. It's nonsense. For so many reasons I've tackled so many times before. But I mean, in this particular context, the best thing to say is, well, why are they flying around US Navy carrier battle groups then? Why are they doing that? Why are they confusing the pilots and things like that? Because that's how people get killed if you're in some kind of military situation and the people involved don't know what's going on and they don't know everything around them in terms of any exercise that they were on.
All this mainstream UFO disclosure stuff is a part of a big limited hangout psyop. Is that right there? They won't admit that it could be American man-made technology. It's got to be the Russians.
Well, they have explored that possibility, as have I, but I've explained why it's not that. And it's also not Russian or Chinese either.
Chinese or even aliens. So
it's not Russian or Chinese stuff. I mean, it's worth watching Tear in the Sky, this video which Dave Altman was involved in, which I interviewed Dave and the other guy who I can't remember his name. He's also called David, and he was involved in the technical side of the film, designing the machines that they used, these new sky watching machines. He invented a couple of new machines for that film.
There's one aspect to this big old UFO psyop. And lastly, I'll just say right here, I'm not a fan of the blue beam fake alien invasion narratives that promulgate around the truth, freedom, patriot movement, social media, basically. I think that's a bunch of clickbait fear porn, honestly. I think most of the Project Blue...
Partly, but I'll say a bit more about that in a minute.
Beam fake alien invasion narratives is clickbait fear porn. Whether that's coming from intel community psyops or not, don't know. But I think what's also happening with this mainstream...
Well, I don't go along with that. What's his name? The French guy who first came up with it. I don't go along with what he said, but there is some truth behind it, I think.
UFO psyop disclosure stuff is the setup of a new social justice warrior movement, a new SJW movement. Because if you notice, I don't know if you follow the UFO movement, UFO community at all.
I think he's about to make the same point that I did, if I remember correctly.
But I have for about...
Yeah, I have watched this film before. I've watched this video before.
Over 10 years now. And, I've been I used to go to some conferences and events for a few years there. So I was able to see and notice a lot of the changes that went on. And even in 2019, 2020 timeframe, I was basically censored and blacklisted out of some pretty major UFO conferences for being pro-Trump, pro-MAGA, exposing all that sort of stuff. So what I'm seeing is the setup of an SJW, like UFO disclosure, sort of Antifa activist movement. The UFO movement's been really taken over with this kind of left-wing agenda. They'll use the UFO disclosure as their virtue signaling, like, yeah, we need government transparency, truth, disclosure UFOs, but then you've got all these UFO blowhards that will tell you to go get that on, that Orange Man bad, elections are, they're like pro CNN, pro New York Times, pro fake news media. It's pretty ridiculous. So that's what I think the main objectives are. So opening monologue aside, let's get into.
Yeah, that's partly true. He's partly right there. Although I think it's not quite as bad as he paints it. It's the actual the sort of what the woke agenda is now. The culture war has come to ufology, but not quite in the way he says. It's not quite as bad as how he says. It's more in what I mean. I won't go into details now, but let me just find you my own video. I made a video on this subject, and I'm actually very proud of, which I'll find for you now. Because I had to deal with this because it basically came into my own life, really, more or less. And it's here. So do watch this video, guys, because this video sums it all up. Women in ufology. Okay, this is a video that I made, which sums up the whole thing. And there's the URL. I mean, you can watch it on whatever platform you like, but it's on YouTube, BitChute, Odyssey, Rumble. There you go. So that's basically why I think Jordan is partly right, but I think he's a little bit too paranoid there. Oh, let's play.
To this article now, this next stage, I guess you could say, in this UFO disclosure psyop. This article comes from an outlet called The Debrief.
Yeah.
And the headline is, intelligence officials say U.S. has retrieved craft of non-human origin. This was just released today. And I bet you over the next few days, throughout this week and next week, we're going to see a lot of mainstream media articles about this exact thing. I bet you this will get primetime coverage on CNN, featured in the New York Times, all sort of stuff like that.
No, I thought that too, but we were both wrong, weren't we? We were both wrong. It's had the mainstream media coverage it has been there. It had the mainstream publications have all covered this, but it's all been like page 10 to 12 stories. It's like minor stories that don't even appear on Siri News on my mobile phone, which only covers like the headlines and the first few lines, the first like 6 or 7 major stories. I mean, this is literally the first people. I thought this would be like number 1 or number 2 story in the media, despite the fact there was other things going on, such as this shooting in Nottingham, Sturgeon being arrested, Trump indicted, stuff like that. But really, unfortunately, it is now in the headlines, but these are the headlines. It's this. That's the level. That's the level in which it is. It's broken through. It's broken through in the bloody septic tank of mainstream media front page news, which is very, very disappointing. And Jordan and I, he must have done this on the day this happened, as he's just said. And I would have agreed with him at the time. I thought this is going to be it's going to be on every newsstand, and it's not. Doesn't mean it won't be, but it's not yet.
Yeah. So it's originating here from an outlet called The Debrief. And right away, I have reservations about this article. Something smells fishy here. Number one, The Debrief. This outlet, this is a media startup that was started 3 years ago, about 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 2019, 2020 timeframe. The co-founder of The Debrief used to be a Vice writer, Vice Media. So The Debrief kind of stems from...
I have mixed feelings about Vice. They've done some good things, and they did a good thing about targeted individuals. They had Kieran, what's his name, was on there. But they've also done some pretty awful film things as well, like about the old Shady Nook thing. They covered that, the Alex Jones situation with Shady Nook. They did a appalling hit piece on that.
Mainstream media writers, and then the 2 authors of this article in particular, Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal, they're New York Times writers. They're reporters for the New York Times.
No, they are freelance. Ralph Blumenthal was a staff writer for 45 years on the New York Times. He's now a freelance writer and still sells them articles under commission. Leslie Kean has never been a staff writer for the New York Times. She's an activist and a researcher, and no, they're not actually working for the New York Times.
The New York Times articles from December 2017, I was just talking about a minute ago, the 2 that dropped, where you remember those black and white videos from the Go Fast, USS Nimitz videos, the black and white ones, blah, blah, blah. Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal were the authors of that.
Yeah,
They were the writers for the New York Times
We
that wrote
know.
those articles in December 2017 that kicked off all this mainstream media UFO disclosure stuff. So we have Vice co-founder from the Debrief that started the Debrief, and we have former New York Times reporters Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal. Something smells fishy with this already.
Well,
But anyway,
that's only if you poison the well, Jordan. What's the content?
crux of this article is that the story is a former intelligence official turned whistleblower has given Congress and the intelligence community inspector general extensive classified information about deeply covert programs that he says possess retrieved intact and partially intact craft of non-human origin. Wow, so that's big.
Yeah.
Now, the government possessing craft of non-human origin, yeah, honestly, they've likely had those for 70 years. Since Roswell, even before Roswell, you have the Battle of Los Angeles incident in 1943. And
42. I remember because if you remember, it was the 80th anniversary last year. I did a special video about it. Do you remember?
and even other incidents where there is somewhat decent evidence to show that our government retrieved non-human craft and maybe even has been reverse engineering that for decades now. So that's really nothing new, but the story here is that we have supposedly a whistleblower bringing that information to Congress. Okay, the whistleblower name is David Charles Grusch. He's 36. He's a decorated former combat officer in Afghanistan. He's a veteran of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and the NRO, National Reconnaissance Office. He served as the Reconnaissance Office's representative to the UAP Task Force from 2019 to 2021. And from late 2021 to July 2022, he was the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency's co-lead for UAP analysis and its representative to the task force. So for the past few years, he's been doing UFO stuff for the government. Before that, he was doing stuff. He was a combat officer. I think he was in the Air Force. And then he started working in the intelligence community. So there's our whistleblower right there. He might be an honest guy. He might believe that he's doing the right thing. He probably does. But I think the grander scheme of things we're seeing here, a part of this UFO disclosure op, is being managed.
That's kind of a circular argument, though, isn't it? Because he's like saying, well, this guy means well, but he's being managed by this UFO psyop that's going on. How do you know the UFO psyop that exists? Because of what Grusch is saying. It's a circular argument, which is a fallacy.
And I think these certain people like him, also some of those Navy pilots that you've seen on maybe Joe Rogan or talk to the mainstream media. What's his name? Ryan Graves.
There's Ryan Graves, David Fravor, Alex Dietrich, Ryan Graves. But there's also other people. There's sailors on the USS Princeton and the USS Nimitz, such as Sean Cahill, who were part of the team which detected these objects electronically from the ships and from the aircraft as well.
I think he's an honest guy, and I think some of these other people are honest people with good intentions, but I just don't think they see or are privy to or are intuitive to, I should say, the greater op that's going on. How the CIA, for decades, CIA, other intelligence groups have been suppressing and managing UFO disclosure. And I think,
well, the thing is, yes, I mean, if such a conspiracy existed, they wouldn't be privy to it. No, they would be used. They may well be put out there and given the information they need to know and treated as useful idiots and put out in the media, put on Joe Rogan, etc. To give out this information. However, what evidence is there that actual conspiracy exists? I dispute that such a conspiracy even exists, whereas Jordan thinks it does. I've actually covered this so many times, I don't need to repeat myself, but I don't believe there's the CIA like putting out, I don't believe they have created this kind of massive neo-mythology to do with UFOs to launder more down-to-earth secrets and things like that. I don't believe that. There is the risk of, like I said, the possibility of they might say, well, there's nasty aliens out there. So this is disclosure, guys. We're telling you, there's evil aliens out there, all right? We didn't tell you because we didn't want to panic you, and we know they're enemies and they want to take over the world, but we'll save you. We, the government, will save you, okay? All you got to do is hand over all your civil rights. We create a tyrannical one-world government to defeat the aliens temporarily, of course. And then when the alien threat is removed, the power we took from the people, we will return to the people. Honest, we promise. Hand on heart, guys. So that is a possibility. I admit that's a possibility. I don't think we should assume it is true, because if we do that, we then miss the, we have to tread, I think, a narrow path between excessive cynicism and excessive naivety. However, we do have that has to be kept there as a possibility. But if we assume that's the case, then we miss this golden opportunity for willing disclosure. We can't afford to miss that either. That's the dilemma we face. And I don't think Jordan quite grasps that.
I think they're still doing it. Again, all this looks like a well-meaning, well-intended, transparent UFO disclosure movement, but I think there's definitely some puppet strings behind the scenes when you look closely.
It's possibly, well, it's
our whistleblower.
They may be, you see, but it's not what he says it is.
Over here, Grusch said the recoveries of partial fragments through and up to intact vehicles have been made for decades, right? Through the present day by the government, its allies, and defense contractors. Analysis has determined that the objects retrieved are of exotic origin. So whatever exotic origin might mean, they're probably
they're in brackets,
making
mate.
that term vague.
It's obvious what it means. It's there in brackets. You can see it even on the screen, of non-human extraterrestrial intelligence.
Let's see here. Grusch's disclosures and those of non-public witnesses under new protective provisions of the latest defense appropriations bill signal a growing determination by some in the government to unravel a colossal enigma with national security implications that has bedeviled the military. For many decades, the Air Force has carried out a disinformation campaign to discredit reported sightings of unexplained objects.
Yeah.
They're referencing Project Blue Book back in the 60s and 70s. Now, with 2 public hearings and many classified briefings under its belt, Congress is pressing for answers. See, these New York Times writers, former New York Times writers, now writing for the debrief, they're assuming that there still isn't some disinformation campaign going on here.
No. I think they just... What they are thinking is that it's different to what you're saying. I think they must understand deep down there's a possibility this could be abused. They're just not. They're not thinking as you are that the whole thing is just simply set up from the ground. It's from scratch, and there's nothing more to it.
They think just because NASA had a hearing and Congress had a hearing that we must be getting honest answers now, and everything the government knows is now coming to the surface. No. That's a classic limited hangout.
But if you watch like Need to Know, Ross and Bryce do discuss that. They do explain when they do critiques of these hearings, and the idea that they are holding things back and they are being dishonest still.
Counterintelligence disinformation campaign. They offer bits and pieces, like tiny fragments of the truth. They volunteer those to purposely hide the rest, to hide the more sensitive information, the bigger bombs from coming out public. So they're kind of playing us for dumb here. And that's honestly what a lot of this mainstream media UFO reporting is doing, is playing the public for stupid and trying to make it look like what we're seeing now is...
You see what I mean about him being a backslapper? It's a psyop, man. It's a psyop. You all can't see it, but I can, because I'm superior to you, man. Yeah, man, I'm superior. Yes, it's typical backslapping.
An honest, transparent disclosure initiative, when I don't think it is. Let's see here. The debrief also references Christopher Mellon. He spent 20 years in the intelligence community. He's a member of the Mellon banking family, the rich Mellon banking family. So honestly, I don't trust Chris Mellon.
Is that the reason? Is it? You see, as Richard Dolan rightly points out, how long are we going to simply dismiss everything anyone says simply because of their background? Are we going to let this background discredit them, just regardless of anything they put forward?
Picture of him down in this article somewhere. Hold on. That's him. I don't trust Chris Mellon. He was one of the dudes that was working with Tom DeLonge and Tom DeLonge's To the Stars Academy initiative back in 2017, 2018 timeframe.
Yeah, but Chris Mellon left along with Lou Elizondo and a couple of others. They split from TTSA.
And, Chris Mellon is another one who is claiming, oh, all of this is honest government disclosure now, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I don't think that's the case.
Well, what if it is? See, what if, like I said, this is a guy who understands there are white hats. He understands there is the 17th letter is real. Yeah, but when something comes forward to suggest that white hats and the 17th letter are actually actually doing something, they've actually taken power back after the 2020 fiasco. They've actually regained some ground and actually still have some control of some of the processes. Whenever that happens, he says, no, it's not. It's impossible. It's impossible. Chris Mellon's a shill. David Grusch is a shill. They're all shills. Everyone's a shill except me and Richard D. Hall and Andrew Johnson and a few other people. I'm just going to. Do you mind slapping my back a minute now? And I'll just slap yours, and we can sit in a circle, jerking off about how superior we are to everyone else. Do you see what I mean?
So he's linked in this article. There's a couple other people they reference as well, talking a little bit more about the whistleblower here. Let's see here. Grusch prepared many briefs on unidentified aerial phenomena for Congress. That's our whistleblower. While in government, and helped draft the language on UAP for the National Defense Authorization Act, spearheaded by Senators Kirsten Gillibrand and Marco Rubio, and signed into law by President Biden in December 2022. So that's another reason I'm skeptical to this, is because the Congress people who are spearheading this UFO disclosure effort, some of the loudest voices about it, are Kirsten frickin' Gillibrand, Miss Nexium sex cult connected senator there.
Yeah, she's also pro-abortion as well, and that, of course, my feelings on that. I did my March for Life video. But you see, the thing about it is, what about there's others? This is very cross-partisan. There's Tim Burchett as well, who's very different.
The Democrat clown out of New York, Kirsten Gillibrand, and also Marco Rubio, who's got rhino colors all over him. So if those are the Congress people spearheading this effort, I'm skeptical.
Okay, rhino means Republican in name only. It's an American term.
And then this is something else making me skeptical of all this too. Our whistleblower, Grusch, is represented by Charles McCullough III, a senior partner of the Compass Rose Legal Group in Washington.
Well, he's not in the Compass Rose Legal Group anymore, is he?
And the original Inspector General of the Intelligence Community, confirmed by the Senate in 2011. At that time, McCullough reported directly to the then Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper. So the lawyer for our UFO whistleblower here is Charles McCullough, who was a Obama nominee, mind you, to this position of Inspector General of the Intelligence Community. Lawyer Charles McCullough used to report directly to James Clapper. Great. But
Clapper himself has made some sort of disclosure-like noises. And what's more, this is more poisoning of the well.
Lawyer for our whistleblower here, Charles McCullough. He joined Compass Rose Legal Group in 2018. This is the press release about that. Here are the lawyers. Here's the website of Compass Rose Legal Group. Here are the lawyers for it. There's Charles McCullough. You might be familiar with this guy, Mark Zed. This guy is an absolute scumbag, DC swamp shill bastard. He has been like a seething anti-Trump orange man bad. He's gone on all sorts
of... Well, McCullough's now left the firm, so it's not relevant anymore.
Networks, NBC, CNN. He actually represented one of the whistleblowers, one of the fake whistleblowers that came out in 2019 with allegations that Trump was committing treason with Ukraine in those phone calls. Remember, this was actually the foundation of the Trump impeachment nonsense that went on.
I remember that.
And of course, remember Trump.
I remember that. I don't remember this guy being involved, but obviously this is somebody if this guy was the lawyer behind, if this was the lawyer behind Grusch, then of course you'd have to ask, well, why? But it's not. McCullough. It just happens to be in the same firm. It doesn't mean that McCullough is affiliated to this Zed guy.
Acquitted for, but yes. So the whistleblower, remember Eric Ciamarella? That was the lame-ass whistleblower that tried to get Trump impeached. That was the lawyer for him. This is Eric Ciamarella's lawyer, Mark Zed. So Mark Zed works with Charles McCullough. Charles McCullough is
Well,
representing
he's in the same firm, and he was in the same firm, which McCullough has now left.
our UFO whistleblower here. So my point being is that our UFO whistleblower is represented by some real swamp lawyers. Like, that's another red flag, another big red flag here. So then we just proceed through the rest of the article, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so here they even write, Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal co-authored the December 17th, 2017 front page article in the New York Times that disclosed the existence of a secret Pentagon program investigating UFOs.
Yeah, well, that was true.
So, yeah, I mean, when you have the New York Times running front page with this and Politico and CNN and all that, it makes me believe that the CIA is probably involved in this.
Yeah, but again, this is poisoning the well, and it's based on the assumption that the government is one single unit and there's no division within them. I don't think. See, I'm surprised that Jordan is taking this line. I really am, because he understands the 17th letter more than anyone else in the whole UFO fraternity. So really, can't you see, Jordan? This could well be the 17th letter has actually taken over and occupied the whole disclosure process. Has that occurred to you? Think about it. It might. I mean, I'm not saying it's definitely true, but it might be.
This in some way, like managing, carefully puppet stringing all these disclosures. And I don't think what we're seeing is an honest, transparent disclosure. I think all of the mainstream blowhards on Twitter and social media and running around doing Joe Rogan interviews and CNN interviews, I think they're all either useful idiots. There's a lot of useful idiots in the UFO disclosure movement these days.
Yeah.
A lot of UFO.
It's more backslapping.
Or useful idiots in the UFO movement. Or knowing deceivers, right? Knowingly putting out disinformation to muddy the waters. Chris Mellon might be. I don't know. I speculate he might be a knowing deceiver. And also that Lou Elizondo guy. You're familiar with him. You've seen him and his goatee around. I think Lou Elizondo might also be a part of this op knowingly. But who knows? Who freaking knows, man? So just wanted to make a video talking about this article, sort of warning you that you're probably going to be seeing this story, this headline in mainstream media articles over the next few days and weeks. This is kind of the next stage.
Not on the headlines, though, unfortunately.
Of it. New whistleblowers coming out, right? So, yeah, there's some deets on that. And I'm still highly skeptical of all this UFO disclosure stuff. I think it's a limited hangout. I don't think Blue Beam or fake alien invasion are coming. I think that is misdirection, right? I mean, here's the thing. It's tough to have conversations, like truly intellectual, deep conversations about UFOs these days without somebody shouting from the rooftops, Blue Beam, fake alien invasion. Like, it's just difficult, right? And I think that might be some of the fear porn, clickbait goal of the Blue Beam fake alien invasion stuff, is to misdirect the conversation away from more important or more verifiable narratives.
Well, I don't know about Project Bluebeam itself. I know it's the product. It came out of this guy, a French guy, who ended up in jail and ended up in jail. All right, okay, that's not important. He ended up in jail, and I think he died in jail or something in suspicious circumstances. But the idea that if the deep state were desperate, that they wouldn't try something like what you see in Project Blue, and that is stage a fake, make out there are evil aliens when there's not, or make out the aliens that they've discovered and they're forced to tell us about are actually evil, if only to dig themselves out of this very sticky situation that they've lied to us for all these years. They may just pretend it for that reason, but it's for the reasons I've just explained. For as a double or quits final push for the New World Order, they would do it. I think you can have an intellectual conversation and include that. And it's perfect. I'm perfectly willing to do that with Jordan or anyone else. I don't think we should dismiss it. So, yeah. Interesting stuff here. We'll see how it progresses. But thanks for watching, guys. Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel. Appreciate you. And I will see you next time. Another reason for Jordan, me being frustrated with Jordan. He's made a couple more videos. Now I won't go into them. I won't show them to you, but he's made several more videos in which he starts talking about body language analysis and statement analysis. And now there's nothing inherently wrong with being interested in body language and statement analysis. Nothing inherently wrong with it. But as you know, I am a critic of it simply because there's so many now with Grusch, and they're all, as I said, all the body language and statement analysis people, they're all pouring in now like a flock of vultures to hover over David Grusch and see what they can get from him. And of course, as I said, Richard D. Hall, I'm sure he's wheeling out Peter Hyatt, and they all will. This is all gonna. This is bad. This is inevitable. I've seen 2 body language analyses so far of Grusch. I'm not going to watch any more. And they, as I said, they do disagree. It's not an exact science. One claims he's being honest. The other claims he's actually being very deceptive. Both of them agree that he feels nervous and he feels uncomfortable with talking about this. But apart from that, they disagree. There's going to be others that have different opinions. But the thing that bothers me the most about body language analysis and statement analysis is that the people who are enthusiastic for that method tend to be the people who have abandoned all other methodologies. In other words, they have put aside all other forms of research and scholarship and focused entirely on this one method. Body language analysis, statement analysis, and nothing else. And of course, the classic offender is Richard Z. Hall. You know, when Rendlesham Forest came along, he says, I'm going to solve it once and for all. We're going to get to the bottom of this mystery. I know people have been going on about it for 45 years and we have no final answers. I'm going to find the final answer. How? Peter Hyatt. And then he does a 2-hour program with nothing but Peter Hyatt. He doesn't consult with me. He doesn't consult with Gary Heseltine. He ignores us because his opinion of us is so low that he just ignores us. And he focuses entirely on what Peter Hyatt says. So he's abandoned all other forms of scholarship and other forms of research. He believes he can solve this mystery with this one methodology. It's rather like a bank. If you have a bank robbery, right, and some guys with stockings over their head rush in and they point a gun at the cashier and run out with money, bags full of money, and there's this old lady hobbling past on a Zimmer frame, and the police come along and they arrest her and they give her the Peter Hyatt test and she fails it. Is she now the prime suspect for that bank robbery? This is why I have quite a dim view, not of body language and statement analysis itself, but of the way it is used. It is employed badly. I think people have too much confidence in it, and the people who tend to be enthusiastic about it, like I said, the people who tend to ignore other forms of research, especially and really don't have anything to do with many people involved in it. That's the problem. Okay, so we now have what am I going to do next? I can't remember. Let's go back to there was something else I wanted to show you in Ponte Vecchio. Where is it now? I had it. I didn't make a note of this, but there was something I wanted to. There was something that looked like from above. It looked like there was some kind of marking or something. Where is it? Oh, where is it? It could be, and like I said, it doesn't really matter if I can't find it because it's something very minor. There's some kind of building site there. I don't know. That's nothing to do with it. It's a long shot. I mean, it's really there's not much on it, but it is a beautiful location though. It's a beautiful location. I mean, I suppose the thing that I'm sure Roberto Panotti's already done this is go to the area. Go to this location and see if you can find anyone who remembers it. Now, to have been a kind of person who would be old enough to remember what happened in 1933, they'd have to be very old. They'd have to be very old, and we're talking 90 years ago, so they'd have to be in their 90s, probably their late 90s, to remember. But it is possible there may be someone alive in the area today who was alive back then and remembers, maybe as a small child playing around in a field somewhere, and this thing comes down and all these black-suited RS-33 people appear and they, the usual Roswell thing. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure Roberto Panotti's already done that. Okay, so now we got one. I've got one more thing I want to go. We're sticking with the bad now. We've done the good and the ugly. Now we're going to stick. We're going to carry on with the bad. Michael Shermer. 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 Oh, Michael Shermer. What's he up to? Right, Michael Shermer, editor of Skeptic magazine. You may have seen him on Twitter because he's been going on a big time about all this. He's been making a lot of noise about this particular subject. But he has done a video which I'm going to analyze now. Now, Michael Shermer, you know, you may have seen my video. I actually made a video. I think I made two or three videos about Michael Shermer because there was some evidence, and I wrote some articles about him too. There is some indication that he may be wavering. He is still strolling down Skeptic Avenue, but he's doing so he's a lot less confident, it appears, than he used to be. And the reason I think it's partly his own experience, which I describe in my videos about him. It's his own experience. He encountered he experienced a very strange synchronicity when he got married a few years ago. I bring this up in my Skeptic talk if you want to check that out. I'm not going to put a link in the description box. You can find my Skeptic talk. So there's several versions of it. Try the latest one at Sufon. He had a very, very strange experience of synchronicity, which, as he said, rocked me back on my heels and shook my skepticism to its core. He then has been on the Joe Rogan Experience several times with Graham Hancock. And their first interview was rather very combative, and Hancock was like giving him hell. Their second one was slightly more diplomatic, and indeed then it was revealed that since they've been on Joe Rogan together, they've become friends. So Graham Hancock and Michael Shermer are now friends. I think it's only a matter of time before Shermer ends up going on an ayahuasca retreat with Graham. So I think of all the main rock star skeptics in the world, Shermer is probably the one most likely to defect, shall we say. Now, I'll bring this up in my skeptic talk. There is another reason as well, which it actually ties into the culture war, which Jordan Sather and I both talk about. That is the introduction of wokeness into our subjects. Wokeness has also invaded the skeptic movement, and in a really big time. There was like a major woke infiltration of skepticism, and Shermer has been on the receiving end of this because. At a recent conference quite a number of years ago, before he got married, he ended up having a rather drunken liaison with some young woman, and then there was a rape allegation and things like that. And all the wokies and feminists in the skeptic movement were saying, "Shermer's a rapist. There you have it. She said so it's true." And then, of course, when the facts came out that she made this allegation, you know, a couple of weeks later and never called the police and things like that. Of course, the wokies and feminists would not take no for an answer, but everyone else was saying, "Hang on a minute, you just accused this guy. It appears he's innocent. Now you're gonna retract this or what?" And Sherman was very distressed by this. I think he was considering taking legal action. And I think that's been a bit of a wake-up call for him as well. But anyway, he has made a video which I'm going to skip some of it because I'm going to skip a segment of it because he just goes through the history of the whole thing to explain to his viewers. But I'm going to do a deep dive into this nonetheless. As you see, I've already disliked it. This is Skeptic. There's the channel which I subscribe to. Yep, I do, as I said. And I'm just going to listen. I'm familiar with Shermer. I've studied a lot of what he talks about. And he's wrong, but he's wrong in a way that makes it interesting to talk about. Here we go.
Hello, everyone. It's Michael Shermer, and it's time for another episode of the Michael Shermer Show. This one, a special...
I like that book behind him. It's lines. Conspiracy. You got to follow the lines there. Is that one of his books? Because he's written a number of skeptic books.
Commentary. So no guests today, and I'm doing this under the watchful eyes of Carl Sagan. The painting there by Pat Lindsay for the cover of Skeptic magazine we did in tribute to Carl when he died. Here it is, the actual issue. And we have plenty of...
I actually did subscribe to Skeptic for a year. I also subscribed to what's it called? The Skeptical Inquirer as well, which was the UK version. Or was it the other way around? But that's a nice picture actually, because it was 1997, I think he died, and that is a nice painting.
of them right over there here in the office where I'm recording this. You can order them online. This is volume 4, number 4. There he is, great Carl Sagan, and his made it on the.
Oh, there you can see him there. That painting of him now. Carl Sagan, of course, is very strange because he was quite in the 50s. He was quite, when he first started out in this. He was into the SETI because he was at the Order of the Dolphin thing with Frank Drake, as I explained in my SETI talk. I keep referring to these old videos I've done. He was at the SETI talk, but then he kind of like he was also quite open to the idea of UFOs. He used to talk to people like J. Allen Hynek and people like that. Then very suddenly in the mid '60s, he got uber skeptic, and indeed Bryce Zabel includes Carl Sagan as one of the real life characters in his Dark Sky series, and hypothesizes, probably correctly, that Sagan was recruited by the CIA. So yeah, it's very interesting that.
The cover of Time magazine, which I purchased online. I bring this up because I wanted to make a commentary on the latest UFO story, or UAP, which used to then stand for unidentified aerial phenomena. Now it's unidentified anomalous phenomena.
You know, AEPD is Stephen Greer's new word. Was it Advanced Energy Propulsion Device? I still just let's just stick with UFO, shall we? Let's just stick with UFO because all these new names just are getting ridiculous.
Titles keep changing, even though there's no more evidence than there ever was.
Well, there is, but that's not
this
why
was a huge news story this week. I'm recording this the week of June 7th.
Well, it was a huge news story within the community, within the people who have an interest to this. It's not been a huge mainstream media story, literally until yesterday, when it became a huge mainstream story yesterday with this bloody piece of trash. That's the problem. Oh, anyway.
Here today, in an article in a site called the Debrief, DEBRIEF. Never heard of it. It apparently is a science.
Well, I have. If you study UFOs from a skeptical perspective, you should have heard of the Debriefs, Michael. You really should.
Website, and the title of the article is "Intelligence Officials Say U.S. Has Retrieved Craft of Non-Human Origin."
Yeah.
This was published 2 days ago, June 5th, 2023. Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal. If those names sound familiar, it's because they are. Leslie Kean is a ufologist and general believer in all kinds of paranormal, supernatural phenomena. She has
so what?
Netflix documentary series.
That sounds like an accusation. Oh, he's going to talk about Netflix, the Netflix thing in a minute. There we are.
They are. Leslie Kean is a ufologist and general believer in all kinds of paranormal, supernatural phenomena. She has a Netflix documentary series, for example, on the afterlife.
That's right. It's what's it called? Let me just find it. It's very good, actually. Life. I can't remember the title of the thing, but it's a very good afterlife. Well, Surviving Death. Oh, it's a book, but she's written a book. Surviving Death by Leslie Kean, and it's a very, very good it's a very good series, actually. Watch Surviving Death on Netflix. Okay, all right, okay. I've actually watched it. You don't. Well, you may say, well, I don't have Netflix. Well, you will find it. I'm not going to direct you to anywhere where it is, but you can find it in other locations. Put it that way. But it's actually a very good series indeed. So, but it's not about UFOs. It's about, as it says, it's about afterlife research, which I'm also very interested in, as you know. That's why we're doing the What Dreams May Come Watch Read Party, of which I've still got to do the live stream, and I would have done the live stream if this thing hadn't got in the way. But it will come. I haven't forgotten. Okay, I haven't forgotten. I'm sure Stephen Truthseeker will remind me, even if I did. Okay, so let's carry on. But I mean, as I said, Shermer is he says this almost like it's an accusation. He's doing something similar to Jordan Sather, this poisoning the well thing. Well, he's of this, he's of that, so maybe we should just ignore what she has to say.
And why near-death experiences are evidence of an afterlife, which we've debunked in Skeptic.
No, you've attempted to debunk it wrongly, I think. Because I have actually read. You see, I've read the skeptic side of the story when it comes to near-death experiences, and I've read the skeptic side of the story when it comes to almost everything. see. So, in my view, they haven't successfully debunked it, but they've had a good try.
Ralph Blumenthal did cover the Pentagon for the New York Times. I don't think he does anymore, but he's also the biography.
Yeah, he does it as a freelance. Yeah, in a freelance work. Yeah, as I said, he was a staff writer for 45 years, and now he still writes them freelance.
Biographer. He wrote a biography, of John Mack, who believes that the psychiatrist who believes that the stories his patients were telling them about being abducted by aliens are true.
Yes, that's because they are, for the most part. I mean, John Mack. I've not read this biography by Blumenthal of John Mack, but John Mack was an admirable character who had a huge amount of moral courage. He didn't go into psychiatry and psychotherapy with the intention of proving that UFO alien abductions were real. He addressed it as a psychological phenomenon at first, but came to his conclusion through evidence and reason, all the things that skeptics like, that these people were having genuine encounters with extraterrestrial beings. So this is another example of I haven't even named the fallacy yet, but I talk about it in my skeptic lecture, where I talk about how you sometimes, in order to maintain the skeptic worldview, you have literally to offline science, reason, and everything else. And Sherman doesn't seem to understand. Sherman perhaps doesn't understand that. Most skeptics don't. Skeptics lack introspection about their own movement, very, very much indeed.
And so that gives you some hint of Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal's.
Well, it explains how you're attempting to poison the well by saying, well, they did these things I don't agree with. They're the people now behind the David Grusch story. So if you're watching this, maybe, it's almost like he's trying to put people off a priori.
Orientation to this subject. They're often portrayed in the media as serious journalists or world-class journalists or something. They're not journalists in the sense of the New York Times hiring objective journalists who are just...
Ralph Blumenthal was a staff writer for 45 years at the New York Times, Michael. Leslie Kean has written freelance articles for the New York Times. Blumenthal still writes freelance for the New York Times. What are you talking about?
Just writing stories about different topics without a particular agenda. They have an agenda. They think we have already been visited.
You have an agenda too. You have an agenda too.
By aliens.
You have an agenda which says that you want to prove that we haven't been visited by aliens. This idea that skeptics decide, oh, well, but I'm a skeptic, so I am this kind of emotional blank canvas. Skepticism is not a belief system any more than the off switch is a TV channel. Just watch my skeptic talks, guys, because I'm not going to put a link to them. You can find it. I've comprehensively discredited that entire notion. He is a true believer as much as anyone else is. He has a bias.
No question about it. And so that is the orientation of it. I'll just read to you. This is an unscripted commentary, by the way. I'm just going to comment on this and put it into perspective. I'll just read you the first few paragraphs.
Okay, I'm just going to skip this bit.
A former intelligence official turned...
This is
such a government bureaucracy issue here. To investigate... From Grusch, we are not talking about...
The only reason I'm skipping this bit, he's just introducing the subject to his viewers, which I don't need to do on my channel because you're already familiar with it because I've already done so.
Prosaic origin. A letter saying the DOD knows I'm saying this.
Okay, here we go.
Even seen photographs of anything on this on Twitter all week.
Okay, here we
signatures,
go,
he said. Close quote. Okay. Oh, final quote here from Grusch. We are not talking about prosaic origins or identities. The materials include intact and partially intact vehicles that he says are of extraterrestrial origin. Okay, I have been commenting on this on Twitter all week.
I know, because I follow him on Twitter.
Let me just kind of go through some of these comments.
Yeah, I've not actually replied to him on Twitter. I've put 2 comments on this video, by the way, and I've already had a reply, which maybe I'll bring this up if I remember at the beginning.
I made, first of all, this guy, Grusch, David Grusch, has not seen anything himself. He says that. He says he has not even seen photographs of anything like vehicles or alien bodies or materials of any kind. His sources are secondhand or third-hand. And further, it has come out...
Well, this is basically Stephen Greenstreet's this was his criticism as well, which of course I addressed at the time. It doesn't matter if he did or not. He had knowledge. He was in touch with people who knew about these things. He has enough information from these sources to bring it to public attention. Now, I don't see what's wrong with this. I don't see, well, why is this double? This often happens. You can even go to court sometimes with hearsay, and it will be submitted as evidence in court. Politicians are quite selective about this, because do you remember Iraq, the weapons of mass destruction? Oh yeah, we've heard from somewhere. Somebody told me that Saddam has weapons of mass destruction. It turned out it was like a fake PhD paper, things like that. Two countries went to war on the basis of that so-called evidence, which turned out to be fake. Okay. So now he's saying, well, we shouldn't even look at this evidence, which has a similar weight because it's definitely fake. But what if it's true? What if it's true? Some people still insist that the whole Saddam weapons of mass destruction thing was true. Defenders of that war still insist, oh no, it's true. He didn't have the weapons of mass destruction. We know because of A, B, C, and D. Coulthard and Bryce and Zabel made this point.
That the Department of Defense knows all about what he was going to say and gave him approval.
Yes.
He presented a letter saying the DOD knows I'm saying this.
Yes.
And they approved everything I'm saying.
And?
Okay.
I've already explained why that's, and Leslie Kane herself actually explained on News Nation why that this is what this is really all about. They did indeed, and the reason could be because of the reason that Karine Jean-Pierre says, "Oh, don't talk to me, talk to the DOD." The DOD are now operating independently from the U.S. federal executive. There's a schism within the administration, and the DOD, at least some people in the DOD, as I said, the 17th letter. Jordan Sather doesn't understand this. They're literally people now in control of the truth embargo who want disclosure. This is why they're letting him say this.
So if that's true, then isn't that an admission by the DOD that all of this is true?
Yes.
Or is it a campaign of misinformation? Grusch goes on and on about how he can't say it.
Well, this is why I've said we have to be on our guard for misinformation, but we shouldn't assume misinformation is happening.
Anymore when he faces journalists who ask him probing questions like, how do you know this is true? And where's the evidence? And can you tell us exactly where these sources are?
Yeah, that's what Coulthard did, who you'd no doubt dismiss as another UFO believing nutcase.
And so on. He says, no, I can't because there would be retaliation against me. Retaliation by who? If the Department of Defense says it's okay for you.
Well, it's obvious whom. He's still bound by certain rules, which means he can't just spread classified documents on the table like playing cards. There's a process, Michael, a process. Have some patience.
To go out and say this stuff, then who's going to retaliate against it? Because
as I said, there are people within the DOD who want disclosure. There are also people. The truth embargo still has power. It still has it still has the ability to control Fleet Street. Do you think if the truth embargo was completely controlled by the 17th letter, do you think this would happen? Do you think we'd see this shit? There is a reactionary force at work as well.
Allegedly, it's the government going to retaliate. Who in the government? Okay. The story just gets crazier as you go.
No, it's not crazy.
On and on. I quoted Chris Mellon. Chris Mellon is the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, former Minority Staff Director of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. He's now out of that, but now commenting on UFOs. And he tweeted on June 3rd, I've always believed that the public has a right to know if our government has proof of that some UAP are off-world origin. Lately, I've also come to the conclusion that if true, revealing this incredible secret would also be very much in the interest of our nation. And indeed, it goes on a little bit more than that. Okay, yes, obviously, we're all interested, Mr. Mellon, on whether UAPs represent extraterrestrial off-world spacecraft. That would be good to know. You said you've been studying this subject since 2017. I've been studying it since the early 1990s. We founded Skeptic Magazine in 1992. Carl Sagan has been studying it since the 1950s. Calls for government disclosure go back to the 1940s. And yet, nothing has been disclosed. Nothing. millions of leaked documents, classified documents through WikiLeaks, Afghanistan papers, the Pentagon papers, and all the different tranches of leaked documents, as well as Freedom of Information Act documents. Nothing.
What about Majestic 12? What about Psalm 91? What about the UFO documents do sometimes come to light? It's just people then say they're fake.
Has confirmed any of these claims. Zip, nada, zero. 76 years since Roswell, and nothing. No evidence whatsoever.
Rubbish. There is evidence. Now, Edward Snowden and Julian Assange have not released anything about UFOs, possibly because they haven't. Just because they have access to classified information doesn't mean they have a need to know about everything. Assange's contact was Chelsea Manning, who had a high security clearance and a need to know about certain things to do with the Iraq occupation, which is how he, she, or it came across this film from a helicopter showing the Americans accidentally shooting dead some journalists and then try to cover up their blunder. And he, she, or it says, no, I want to bring this out. So and did so, an enormous cost to them, he, she, or itself. And Assange published this as why he's in trouble. Edward Snowden is to do with the CIA and their electronic surveillance. Again, he had a high security clearance and need to know. Didn't necessarily mean either of those men had need to know, or women or things, whatever they are, had need to know for UFOs as well. So that's a kind of argument from everyone on the inside must know about this. So if they're not leaking it, it doesn't exist. That's firstly. Secondly, as I've already mentioned, documents about UFOs have been leaked, and they've been dismissed by many people, including people within the UFO community. Some of them have dubious. I must say, there is some question mark over some of them, but others, I think, are more likely to be genuine.
Okay, I'm all for it. Go ahead and disclose it. And in fact, the government has, on many occasions, publicly stated, we have no extraterrestrial spacecraft. We have no evidence that we've been visited. We have nothing. This is what they said. And of course, the ufologist's response to this is, they're lying.
Well, if there's evidence they're lying, then yes.
Yes, governments do sometimes lie. They do.
But they, no, Michael, they always tell the truth when it comes to this subject, don't they? Come on, man, you're being a bit selective now.
That doesn't mean that your pet theory is true. Maybe they're telling the truth. But this idea...
Why do you assume they're telling the truth?
That we demand disclosure. And the government says, okay, we have nothing. That's our disclosure. And if your response to that is, well, you're lying, then that implies that the only correct answer, the only acceptable answer that you'll take from the government is, we're hiding the aliens.
Yeah, but that's because that's not just us being stubborn or just us, having an unfalsifiable hypothesis. This is because there is other evidence. There's a corollary case to suggest that the government are doing this. And so when they deny it, it flies in the face of that evidence, which indicates they're being deceptive. And as you just said, governments sometimes lie. Yeah, and they are this time.
Okay. Also note that the astronaut and naval aviator Scott Kelly, the famous Scott Kelly, tweeted, well, actually gave a speech that somebody tweeted online, posted online, which I retweeted, that astronauts and pilots are no better at making observations than anybody else, and they are just as susceptible to illusions, optical illusions, camera illusions, and effects, and so on. He tells a story about how when he was up in space, his fellow astronauts thought that there was a loose bolt or a tool in the payload bay that turned out to be the International Space Station that was 80 miles away from them. He also talks about how pilots have rendezvoused on a buoy, thinking it was their wingmen. And he gives several more examples in this speech.
Yes, I'd like a citation for that.
Which is a NASA speech, in which he says, everyone is susceptible to optical illusion. So this idea that, we have all these pilots.
Yeah, everyone is fallible. Everyone can make mistakes. That's true. But I'd like some citations for the kind of things this guy Scott Kelly is saying. Was he making, and also Oh well, I should mention what about James McGaha? Now, Shermer himself will probably bring this up. If you mention the Phoenix Lights, right, Shermer will say, well, James McGaha was a pilot. He was an Air Force pilot, and he says they're just flares. And, well, he's an Air Force pilot, so we should take his word. We should at least respect his opinion there, shouldn't we? See, I bet he would say that. If he does, then it's a double standard. So he's saying, well, if you dismiss UFOs, well, you're qualified, and you're probably the best person to comment on this. If you don't dismiss UFOs, well, you could make a mistake as well. You're not perfect. Personally, if I knew that, I mean, with all the training these pilots go through, with all the training when you think about it, they have to go through. It takes years to train an Air Force or U.S. Navy aviator pilot. All right, and they rendezvous on buoys and things like that. And now these are aircraft which have sophisticated missiles and cannons and all kinds of weapons, and they might mistake a buoy for an aircraft or a blob on the screen for an airliner. I mean, I'll never fly again, I'll tell you. If they can make mistakes like that and they've got missiles and torpedoes and things like that, I'm never getting on board an airliner again. Because let's keep this in proportion. Yes, they're not perfect, I know. But they are reasonably competent, and they are reasonably able to identify things in the air. The whole point of being an Air Force pilot is you can identify and prosecute targets. You have to know what the target is before you start firing at it. So again, I think Michael Shermer's he's making a sweeping generalization, and I guess that he wouldn't make it if this person if these pilots were dismissing what they saw as UFOs, like James McGaha does.
And we have these astronauts, and they're so much better than the rest of us. Scott Kelly himself, the decorated, renowned, respectable pilot and astronaut, says not true. Because people are always writing, what about these Navy pilots? What about them? They're human. They're no better at observations or no less susceptible to optical illusions than
well, I've just been through that.
The rest of us. Okay, I also tweeted about this description of this UAP in the debrief. By the way, apparently it came out that the authors, Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal, took this story to the Washington Post, who delayed publication. And they said, we went with the debrief, this unknown science and tech website, instead of the Washington Post. Why? Because the Washington Post was going to take too long to publish it. Gee, why would that be? Could it be fact-checking? Could it be they were asking for evidence of these claims?
Well, this is almost exactly what Green Street said, didn't he? I mean, we just... I want to get this right. Where's my exact notes? Hang on a sec. I'm going to go straight to my absolutely correct notes, my absolute notes where I talk about this, because this is a very important thing. Yeah. Where was it? Okay, I can't find it in my notes. Well, if I remember what I said correctly, they talked about the need. The delay really was unacceptable because of the schedule of Congress, if I remember correctly. Congress, basically, we have a window of opportunity for a few months in which Congress can organize hearings and things like that. Then it's all eyes down for the re-election campaign in November 2024, which means that basically a lot has to happen in the next couple of months. Then the putting Grusch out there really was an impetus. It was a spur to get the process rolling. And that the mainstream papers, it wasn't about fact checking and things like that, because we all know that, with Kane, Blumenthal, all of us have been completely open about the weight of evidence we're talking about here. We're not saying, oh, he's going to wheel in a dead alien. None of us are saying that. So exactly when it comes to fact checking, what Sherman says, well, maybe were the Washington Post fact checking and things like that? The fact checking has already been done by the people who are publishing it. The debrief did the fact checking. Ross Coulthard did the fact checking. It's actually discussed. The fact checking process is published in the article. There was a need to publish as quickly as possible, as Kane and Blumenthal said, to get to add some energy to this process and maintain the momentum that they built up, so that this could be dealt with before the election campaigning began. That's why.
Remember, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
What? Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. My God, Michael, that is so original. That is so original and witty. Oh my God, I must make a note of that. Let me pen and paper. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. I'll write that on my notebook here, and I'll get it out at parties, and I'll wow everyone. I'll wow people with it as I recite it, and everyone will think I'm so cool and I'm so clever. I'm such a clever guy. That's what I'll do. I'm so erudite and sophisticated. Oh, I thought of another one. I thought of one. Michael, get your pen and paper out, right? It's good to be open-minded, but not so open-minded that your brain falls out. Hey, that's good. Write it down, Michael, because you don't want to forget that. You don't. Oh, was it? Okay. Yes, we're all atheists about the old gods, but atheists go one god further. Yes, that's another one. That's great. Let's keep them coming. Keep them coming, guys. Well, you know, I'm being sarcastic, of course.
This is a claim of the most extraordinary nature. It would be
how many extraordinary points does it have, Michael? It's extraordinary is a qualitative assessment. I go into this in my skeptic talk. It's qualitative. Either you say, does it have 10 extraordinary points or 20? You need to state that, and then the purpose of the person making the claim, the duty of the person making the claim is then to provide some evidence with that same level of extraordinary points. If you can't say how many extraordinary points there are, and you're just talking qualitative terms, then it's a non sequitur.
Greatest discovery in human history. We have made contact. We have solid physical evidence of extraterrestrial visitation. And the evidence for this is nothing. Second or third hand stories. There's no photos. There's no,
not yet.
No physical evidence. And you wonder why the Washington Post may be hesitant to publish that story.
I've already been through that. We've explained why.
Here was the description of exotic origin, non-human intelligence, and so on. Well, I read this. Oh no, I didn't read this part. Based on vehicle morphologies and material science testing and possession of unique atomic arrangements and radiological signatures. Really? Well, can we see the data, graph, the charts, the chemical analysis? Anything? No.
Yeah, you cannot. You probably will be able to at the hearings.
Okay. Are there any photographs? No.
Do you want the guy to spend the rest of his life in jail? The Department of Defense have given him permission to speak about it, but not to reveal the documents. What are you asking from this guy?
Is any of your sources actually seeing these spacecraft? No. Or maybe
no, that's not true. They have.
Somebody who knows somebody said they saw them. Okay, this is the problem. This is what constitutes evidence. It's always been this bad. And that description I read about this whistleblower, David Grusch, being a decorated combat officer. When you have no evidence, this is what you have to do. You have to prop up the credentials of the observer, of the whistleblower. Okay, and I just showed you that.
But we've just been through that. You would do exactly the same if it was James McGarr. You would do exactly the same, Michael. You're a hypocrite. Or I suspect you would do that, which means I suspect you would be a hypocrite.
Astronaut Scott Kelly said the credentials don't matter. They're just as susceptible to being fooled. Okay, continuing on this. As I described in one tweet, this is the latest semi-annual the government is hiding alien spacecraft with a half-life of 2 weeks that will result in zero disclosure of any actual evidence that we've been hearing about for 75 years. When will anyone actually ever produce physical evidence? I write in my tweet, never. This is pure myth-making. Let me just put this into some perspective for you. I showed you that copy of Skeptic with Carl on the cover. That was from 1996. The last issue.
96, not 97. Right. I know he died sometime in the mid to late 90s.
Skeptic with my partner, Pat Lindsay, before she died was in 2021, the end of 2021, in which we addressed the recent government UFO sightings. Okay, so that's 2 years ago that this story was huge. And then what happened to that story? The UAP videos and all that? Nothing.
Not true. If you follow as I know he's going to explain in a minute how he is following the ufological scene, he will know that it didn't. A lot happened with it. A lot.
Nothing ever happened. We did an issue of Skeptic in 2001 on the SETI search for extraterrestrial intelligence.
SETI is separate from ufology.
We did one issue in 2004 on if these are not UFOs, what are they? These are medieval and early modern paintings that allegedly show UFOs, and they don't.
Well, you don't know what they show. I mean, that's the thing. I've not read that article, but I've read skeptics talking about this.
We did another issue, let's see, this is from 2002 on how religious people respond if we discover extraterrestrial intelligence.
I think I'd probably find that interesting to read, because I do wonder about that myself.
Of course, we addressed Roswell.
Yeah, Roswell.
That's from 2003. And the myth
I think I used that book cover, actually, in one of my skeptic talks, that magazine cover, rather.
Making behind that. Okay, so the point of that is to show we've covered this story for 30 years.
You have indeed, and your position on it has been wrong for 30 years and longer.
And just to put it into perspective, we still have no evidence. Nothing.
Yes, we do.
Nada. 30 years of just for skeptics.
In your position, in your view as an editor of that magazine, you believe there's been no evidence, but there has been evidence which you have ignored and dismissed.
And we've been looking, we've been asking, we've been digging. If we had evidence, we would show it to you.
Well, you've been digging and you've dug things up and then just thrown them away. If you would show, why? As I said, the Phoenix Lights is the perfect example.
But we wouldn't have to wait for evidence from us. It would be obvious. Just think about the Chinese spy balloon, right? No one describes the pilots who saw the Chinese spy balloon as being, decorated combat officers, who have great eyesight, or they have great knowledge of what aerial phenomena look like, so they can correct. They just took a picture of it. There it is. Everybody could see it. And then they shot it down. Okay, that's what happens.
The same thing happened with the UAP, and these videos were published. The Go Fast, the gimbal, and things like that. The Go Fast, the gimbal, and the Tic Tac.
When you have real evidence, it doesn't matter who the pilots are. There it is.
You see, the reason we have to stress and bolster our claims is because of the ridicule that comes back at us. It's almost like, maybe it is a fallacy. I admit that, but it's something we do instinctively, because we always know that people are going to get attacked. So there's going to be attempts to discredit them. Whenever someone says something like that, someone will try and dig something up from their past or anything about them they can find. Sometimes they just make stuff up about them. That's why we do it, Michael. No one's going to do that over a balloon. And as I said, the skeptics are just as guilty of this as we are. James McGaha is always introduced as a decorated Air Force pilot. Whenever he comes along and he explains what millions of people saw, think they were alien spacecraft, including Governor Symington of Arizona, who's also a former Air Force pilot, and he comes on and says they're just distress flares, or they're just navigation flares. And I know, because I'm a big pilot, and all the skeptics go, yes, I know, that's right.
It is. Everybody can see it. It's on the nightly news, story, end of story, right? Again, just to put some of this in perspective, I have a library, I don't know, 3,000-4,000 volumes in my office here, and I have just one whole bookcase of just UFO books. I just pulled some of them off the shelf just to show you that this is not a new story.
We know that,
Okay?
Michael.
Here is a book called Abduction by John Mack. Human Encounters with Aliens.
John Mack almost lost his career for writing that book. Danny Sheehan basically had to represent him pro bono when he was up in front of the Harvard dean's office and said, we want you out of our university. Even though you've got tenure, we want you out because for writing this stuff. He reports how his colleagues ostracized him. He used to walk into the cafeteria. He used to sit down at a table and they would stand up and walk away, not even looking at him. The human brain responds to ostracism the same way it responds to torture. Now, is Michael going to acknowledge that? I suppose Michael's going to say that Mac just wanted to suck off the UFO dollar or something. Is that what he's going to say? I hope not. I credit him with a little bit more dignity than that. That's a very good book. Do read that. It's a very good book. Along with Bud Hopkins's, and along with what's the other one, Encounters, and there's Bud Hopkins's book that he wrote at the same time. Very, very good books.
Here's another one by John Mack. This is the
I've not read
Harvard
that.
Psychiatrist I told you about, that Ralph Blumenthal, the author of.
He almost wasn't a Harvard psychiatrist because of this thing which you won't acknowledge. This fact that you do this bias that you won't acknowledge, which is establishment. It's in the establishment. And you won't acknowledge it. He almost ceased to be a Harvard psychologist because of that. Would you have stood up for him, Michael? To be fair, right, Michael Shermer probably would have stood up for John Mack because he's a libertarian. Shermer is a very dedicated libertarian. I respect him for that. He probably would have stood by Mack.
This debrief story, I wrote a biography of. This is called Passport to the Cosmos: Human Transformation and Alien Encounters. Here's one by David Jacobs, The Threat.
Oh, right. I've not read that.
The
That's a new one. That's quite a recent book, I think. I've not read it, but everyone's raving about it. I think it should be on my list.
Secret Agenda: What the Aliens.
I wouldn't get the big hardback edition. I'd get a paperback. They're much smaller and easier to handle and easier to store.
Really want and how they plan to get it. Here's one called Aliens Among Us by Ruth Montgomery.
I've heard of that.
In which she describes she is one of America's most beloved writers. Syndicated Washington columnist on politics and world affairs, she has made the discovery that aliens are walking among us.
Well, interesting. Yeah, I'm not.
Here's
I'm not
one by George Adamski from the 1950s.
That's a bloody classic.
Or early 60s. Inside the Spaceships.
But
he went there.
You can see how old that book is. That's probably a first edition, like you said.
He was inside the alien spaceships. Okay, there they are. All right, let's see. Let's double check what year this was published, just to show you how far back this goes. 1955, George Adamski. Okay, here's another one. Aboard a Flying Saucer. Okay, Truman Bathurum. And notice at the bottom they put nonfiction.
I've not heard about
He's not just making this up. It's a true account of factual experience. There he is. There's the spaceship. Not a photograph. It's a painting. And it's not
I know. So
what? Let's double check what year.
It's a piece of cover art.
Was again, just to show you how far back this story goes. We're talking 1954, the year I was born. Interesting.
So
here's a diagram of the UFO. No photographs, of course, and he failed to grab any of the widgets on the.
Yeah, but in those days, cameras were big boxy things. You had to you couldn't just whip your phone out and go click. They were big boxy things. You had to set them up and wind them on and things like that. So photographs were harder to get hold of in those days.
Dashboard of the spaceship. Here's a more recent one. We Are Not Alone.
Who's that by?
We might not be alone in the universe. We're not alone. Why we have already found extraterrestrial life.
Well, what's wrong with that? I mean, we have skeptics. We have Shermer himself penned an article for a book which I've read. It's an interesting skeptic book, actually. And do you know what it's called? It's called The Afterlife Myth. The Afterlife Myth. Not the afterlife might not be real. It's the Afterlife Myth. It's a title to a book, Michael. Titles very often include rhetorical statements. So that's a really stupid criticism. Really, really stupid criticism of that book. I didn't even see who the author was.
Oh, really? How did that escape our attention here at Skeptic? Of course, Bud
because you ignore it. That's how it escaped your bloody attention.
Hopkins' Intruder.
Oh, yeah, I've read that. That's very good.
The Incredible Visitation at Copley Woods.
Oh, no, sorry, I hadn't read that one. It was another book I was thinking.
This just goes on. And look at the size of this thing. The Mammoth Encyclopedia of Extraterrestrial Encounters.
That would keep me quiet for the weekend.
Again, just to put this news story into perspective, this is what, 1,000-page, 820-page book, listing all of the alien encounters just up to, let's see what year this was published. 2001. Okay. Yeah. So there's been a few since
shows how common it is.
And this is actually an old idea. I actually have an original first edition of Edward Condon's Scientific Study of Unidentified Flying Objects. This was a legitimate search by a real scientist.
It was a whitewash. It was the end of Project Blue Book in 1968 that this book came out. I've not read this book. I've heard of it. It was just Hynek called that. I think he called it a 1,000-page lie or something like that.
With a real scientific institution. The complete report on the study conducted by the University of Colorado under research contract number F44620 67-C-0035 with the U.S. Air Force. Okay, serious stuff. Look at the size of this thing.
That's Project Sign, Project Grudge, Project Blue Book. Yeah, of course it's big because but it's just a list of cases which they then. Oh, I don't go in. I don't need to go into that. It's a very well-known story, but it's not the last word on everything.
Okay, this was with the appendices. This goes 950 pages long of all the different encounter stories, accounts.
Oh, my book Evans Land was 970 pages, so it just beats it. I'm going to turn the fan on, guys. Sorry.
People who saw unidentified
you can't hear that.
flying objects. Okay, so it's an old story. We have no new evidence.
It's an old story and a true story.
Nothing. Nada. Okay, so what's more likely? Okay, I also have Leslie Keane's book, which I quoted from extensively. Generals, pilots, and government officials go on the record.
So you've read that book and you still say those horrible things about her? Honestly, man, you must have read it in your sleep.
Okay. It doesn't matter. You don't need generals, pilots, and government officials.
You haven't bloody read it, have you?
Show us the damn spacecraft.
You haven't read it. If you say a thing like that, it means you just read the damn title. If you read the book, you'll find out how richer and deeper it is than that.
Yeah. All right. You don't need to go on and on about the qualifications of the observer.
She doesn't go on. For God's sake, read the book, Michael.
Here's what Leslie Keane writes about what these objects likely are. Okay. She says roughly 90 to 95% of all UFO sightings. This is pro-ufologist Leslie Keane, who is certain we've been visited.
Yeah,
this is what she says about all these sightings. That they can be explained as weather balloons, flares, sky lanterns, planes flying in formation, secret military aircraft, birds reflecting the sun, planes reflecting the sun, blimps, helicopters, the planets Venus or Mars, meteors or meteorites, space junk, satellites, swamp gas, spinning eddies, sundogs, ball lightning, ice crystals, reflected light off clouds, lights on the ground or lights reflected in a cockpit window, temperature inversions, hole punch clouds, and the list goes on. So the entire UFO, UAP phenomenon is already 90 to 95% explainable.
No, 95% of reports can be explained. 95% of this is basically someone phoning up and saying, I've just seen a UFO, right? 95% of those are explained. 95% of the UFO phenomenon is not explained because it's she says it in the book. He is selectively quoting Leslie Keane. In the book, she makes this point. She makes this point in that damn book that there is a hardcore of other reports, close encounters, and things like that, and which are more evidentially sound.
As totally ordinary terrestrial phenomena.
No one disputes that. No one says that when someone says, "Oh, you saw a UFO," they phone up someone. No one's suggesting every single one of those people actually saw, a fighter craft from the army of Zeta Reticuli. No one is suggesting that who's serious in ufology.
Okay, so what are we talking about here? These stories we're hearing about, and again, that's all we have is stories of stories of stories. The most it can hope to fulfill is explain the other 5 to 10% of anomalies. Okay, so here we are confronted with the residue problem. That is, any theory has a residue of unexplained anomalies that it cannot account for. That's just true across the board in every field of science or knowledge of any kind. No theory explains everything. Okay, so what do you have to do? What do you do with the anomalies? Nothing. You just keep researching it and see if you can figure it out.
But that's what we're doing. That's what all this is about.
Maybe somebody will figure it out, assign some grad student to it, or maybe we'll never know, and that's okay. But
that's what we're doing. That's what Leslie Keane and Ralph Blumenthal and everyone else is doing.
Build this whole worldview. We've been visited by aliens, ancient aliens, government cover-up, secrets, conspiracies, and so on. Again, it's not to say that the government doesn't love.
No, look. But what you've just described is exactly what you said we should do. To resolve the mysteries, to resolve the residual, right? You say to build this thing about aliens visiting us. That is what we're doing. It's the conclusion that comes from the evidence.
It doesn't cover things up, of course it does. I wrote a whole book about this, my conspiracy book here behind me.
Oh, right.
We know the government does things like that, but that doesn't mean that they always do it. It doesn't mean your pet theory is right.
We're polarizing a bit here because, yeah, not everything they say is a lie. But at the same time, if they say something, you say, well, this is not a lie because I don't want it to be. It's essentially the point he's making. I don't want this to be a lie, so I'm going to say it's not a lie. I mean, it's just this idea that he has bias and doesn't want to admit it.
Anyway, I also will here take a moment to re-up my challenge, which no one will respond to. Put up $1,000. If you put up $1,000, we'll just give the money to a third party. And if I reset the date here, December 31st, 2024, so I'll give you a year and a half here, that the government does disclose actual aliens, and it's obvious, like the Chinese spy balloon. It's just reported on the news. There's photographs. We have the debris. It's over. The President of the United States, the Pentagon, everybody, Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense, and so everybody says, yes, it's true. We have evidence. You get the money. Okay. No one will respond to me. I can't even get a response from anybody. I've tweeted I've tweeted this offer to everybody in the UFO committee. No one will even respond to me.
That's because it's a really bad bet. Now, what he's just said actually is not a bad. It's actually not a bad idea. And indeed, you know, he thinks he's so clever by putting up this bet, right? When plenty of actual mainstream bookmakers have done this. I myself put £10 on Disclosure before the end of 2025. I got 50 to 1 from William Hill, which means I get £500 if that happens. Okay, so all he has to do, I think, is just change the conditions a little bit, and people will lap it up. I would, but he says, "I'll put up 1,000. You got to put up $1,000." Well, why? Why should a stake be 1,000? Why should a stake be the same as your winnings? No, offer 50 to 1. I'll put that bet on Michael. Michael, offer 50 to 1. And I'll put 50 quid on, all right? Can't say fairer than that.
Right? This is not some crazy idea. These are called prediction markets or betting markets. They work. They work in politics. Great.
No, because it's a really bad, no bookmaker no professional bookmaker would put out a bet like that.
Betting markets and prediction markets where people actually put money up, just, on a particular, say, political election. The results of those prediction markets are better than, say, Pew Gallup surveys about what people are actually thinking, who they're going to vote for.
Why? In that case, that should tell you something. People whose livelihood depends on getting it right often are more honest than academics who gets paid the same whether they get it right or wrong. So perhaps then you could explain, Michael, why if I put that bet on now, the same bet that I put on a few years ago, I think I put it on about 5-6 years ago. If I put that bet on now, I would only get 12. I think it's 11 to 1, something like that. They've lowered the odds. They've lowered the odds because they see the writing on the wall that you can't.
When you have money in the game, get skin in the game, people are much more focused on evaluating what's likely to be true or likely not to be true. Yeah. Now, I don't know why people don't respond to this.
I'll just explain why.
They don't actually believe this. That, it's kind of a mythological story. It's like religion. It's like I don't know. It's just something to believe that's cool. It's just kind of a thing to do without taking it too seriously. And if somebody says, well, you want to, because these people post on Twitter, oh, disclosure is coming any day. It's going to happen this week, this month, for sure this year, 100%. Okay, 100% this year. All right. How about I'll give you an extra year. It's December 31st, 2024. I bet you that the government will not disclose. Silence. Okay.
No, UFO Jesus has a bet going with Mick West. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's just not silence.
They are as silent as the aliens. Okay. Okay, let's see what else I said here after this. Okay. All right. Yes, the wagers. This came out last night that this whistleblower, David Grusch, is a huge science fiction Star Trek fan.
So?
Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I am too. But that he initially floated this idea of going public as a whistleblower to disclose the fact that we have been visited and we have actual alien spacecraft. Where did he first take this? He took it to a Star Trek convention
Oh God, I knew
where
they'd
he
do
then
this. I knew they
discussed,
would do this.
with a couple of his Star Trek or fellow ufology folks, this possibility.
It was George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell. And I mean, if you go back to the thing I showed you, earlier today when we talked about the good before we got onto the ugly and the bad. Weaponized episode 21, which I showed you a little clip of earlier. They talk all about the fact they met him at this convention. It's I suppose it's not very good optics, but really it's not relevant.
Let me see if I can get the actual Twitter on this. Let me read to you before I do that. Let me read to you the actual Pentagon response. Okay. This is what the Pentagon says about this story.
All
right. The demand for disclosure.
Let me guess. This is going to be. Oh, sorry. I've already watched this, so I know. But when I was watching this for the first time, I said, "Hang on, this is just going to be Susan Goff, isn't it? This is going to be Susan Goff's statement when she said."
Okay, here it is. Here is the disclosure from the Pentagon. To date, AARO has not discovered any verifiable information to substantiate claims that any programs regarding the possession or reverse engineering of extraterrestrial materials have existed in the past or exist currently. AARO is committed to following the data and its investigation wherever it leads. AARO, working with the Office of the General Counsel and the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, has established a safe and secure process for individuals to come forward with information to aid AARO in its congressionally mandated historical review. Okay.
I don't have to repeat what I've said about that before. I mean, even Grusch himself said that Arrow is being gaslit. I go into more details in other videos in this series.
Okay, so they will protect whistleblowers. Okay, you don't have to be worried about retaliation. Just show.
But the DOD will. But what about the federal government? You assume these things are both the same, as I said.
What's the evidence? Okay, everybody wants to see the evidence.
Yeah.
And if your only response to this is we can't show you the evidence because something bad,
that's not their only response.
Doesn't constitute an argument in science. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. Okay, continuing here. Let's see. Oh yes, that. So they initially disclosed this to Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp at a Star Trek convention while reciting the opening scene of The Wrath of Khan.
So what?
Okay, if you're going, what? Shermer, what are you talking about? Okay, again, let me repeat this. This UFO whistleblower that just came forward this week, over a year ago, appeared initially to Jeremy Corbell, who's the big pro-ufologist, who's absolutely certain we've been visited, the one that made all these UAP videos public, and George Knapp at a Star Trek convention. They discussed coming forward while they were reciting the opening scene of The Wrath of Khan. Okay, this is not what you do if you're a serious whistleblower.
This is a ridiculously low-hanging piece of fruit which you've picked from the tree, and you've obviously either you've not watched the rest of the video, where that's concerned, which is Weaponized 2020. It's this one, right? Weaponized episode 21. You've not watched that, or you are grossly misrepresenting this whole situation. I agree it's bad optics, and I should have guessed the skeptics were like you would jump on this, but it's so dishonest, Michael. It really is. You
are sitting on a story that would be the greatest discovery in human history. This is not how it works. It just isn't. I mean, maybe it is in this case, but this sets off my skeptical alarm.
Bollocks. Bullshit. Okay. It doesn't.
That's probably enough for now.
This is stupid. It does not set off any alarm bells at all. This is just a silly little excuse not to address the situation more seriously. That's all it is.
Stories unfolding. It gets wackier every day. Let me just say, for the record, this is a completely separate question from, are they out there somewhere? Are there extraterrestrial intelligence somewhere in the cosmos? Probably.
Watch my series. And Michael, if you're watching this, watch my video called SETI and UFOs. I understand the difference.
That's why I support the SETI program. Keep listening. Keep looking. Maybe. Possible. It would be incredible if we were alone. I mean, Sagan always made this point. What an incredible waste of space it would be. And it's even worse now in terms of the probability arguments than when Carl was alive, because now we have space telescopes that have detected planets around nearly every star that is examined. Okay, hundreds of billions of stars in each of the hundreds of billions, if not trillions of galaxies, which means there are trillions and trillions of planets. So no matter how improbable it is that a planet is at the right distance and the right size or at right atmosphere for life and water and whatever other conditions have to be there for life to even begin, no matter how improbable it is, it's going to happen because there's the law of large numbers. There's so many planets. And no matter how many contingent steps between bacteria-sized life and big brains like ours, it's going to happen. Happened already once, we know. Here, of course, the intelligent design creationists think that it's evidence for God, but the search for extraterrestrial intelligence is likely to show that, in fact, it happens all the time. Okay, but we have no evidence of this yet. We don't know. But that's a separate question from have they come here?
I know. These are two separate questions. I happen to agree with him that when it comes to life out there in the universe, the difference between Shermer and myself is the difference between all ufologists and all SETI enthusiasts. SETI say, well, they're out there somewhere. We're looking at distant stars through our telescopes. We're saying, yes, they're out there, but they're also down here because they found us already. And what you're looking for, all those miles and miles and millions of light years away, could be hovering just a dozen feet above your observatory.
Okay, the evidence for that is terrible. I've just gone through 20 minutes of why it's so bad.
Yeah, and I've spent longer than that discrediting what you've said.
Obvious that we've been visited. Show us the bodies. Show us the spacecraft.
What will you do when that happens, Shermer? What will you do? You'll say it's a plastic puppet, won't you?
We will believe. I always make the analogy that in biology, if you want to name a new species, you have to have a type specimen. Show it to us. Show us the organism you found. Okay, and if your story is, well, I don't actually have the body. But I was out camping. It was 3 in the.
What do you expect him just to wheel one in?
Morning, and I heard this noise, and I woke up, and I went outside, and I saw this blurry thing running, and I'm sure it's Bigfoot. No biologist is going to accept that as a legitimate form of evidence.
Well, what if you went over and got footprints, got hair specimens for DNA testing?
Evidence for the discovery of another bipedal primate living today. Just not. I'm sorry, it's not out.
Just look at what Richard Freeman. He's a mate of mine. Look at what he's discovered. We're going into cryptozoology now, but it's the same as ufology. It's just they're sort of like parallel subjects.
It works. That is what we are demanding in science for the UFO people. Just show us the spacecraft. Show us the body. You still, after all these decades, got nothing. Okay, so this latest whistleblower. Okay, good. Come forward. Show us the stuff.
But I've already explained how this is different from some of the others who were fake.
Well, the government did. The Pentagon just said, we don't have anything. Okay.
Susan Goff said that, who's a notorious gatekeeper. I expect she is probably an agent of whoever's behind, like Jean-Pierre and the other people at the White House, rather than the DOD.
So what are we supposed to do with that? The ufologists, of course, will always say the only acceptable answer is we have the aliens and we're hiding them.
Well, that's because we have the additional evidence. We're like the policeman who's already got basically the footprints and DNA at the scene, trying to get a confession out of the suspect. And of course, in that situation, the only acceptable answer is going to be, all right, I did it.
Well, sorry, there's nowhere to go with that. So anyway, that's where we're at today, June 7th. 2023 on the latest UFO UAP whistleblower flap story. My prediction again is that within a couple of weeks, no one will be talking about this. There'll be no more evidence than there is today.
You'll still be denying it. If someone presented that evidence, you'd raise the bar.
Okay. And in a couple months, maybe 6 months or so, there'll be another huge UFO story. Everyone will go crazy. This is it. Disclosure is coming any day now. Okay. Well, if you really believe it, go to my Substack skeptic column and take me up, or just email me. I'm readily available online. I check my own emails, DM me on Twitter, take me up on the challenge and win $1,000. What have you got to lose if you really believe? All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Michael Shermer, The Michael Shermer Show, special commentary on UFOs.
All right, that's that. I'm glad I've got that over with. I've already watched that once. I don't want to watch it again. God, I've been going for 2.25 hours. Okay. Now I'm sure a lot of you will sympathise with this. A lot of you will understand this, but some of us. I'll see if I can get away with switching that off. Some of us have been. We've had this I suppose we call. Okay, this will persuade the skeptics moment. Okay, you come across some kind of evidence, some amazing case with really, really strong evidential power, and you think, okay, this is it. This is the one. This is the moment the skeptics will change their minds when we present this evidence to them. We show them this, and then they'll look at this and say, "Oh, right, I see. I was wrong. I was wrong all along because, well, it appears you were right and I was wrong, and that aliens do exist, or Bigfoot does exist, or ghosts do exist, etc., etc. And I'm now going to change I'm going to write a book now explaining how I was wrong in all the other 20 books I wrote." And because, of course, very often when these moments happen, you're being honest with the skeptic, because you are saying essentially, well, look, this is the evidential target which you yourself established. This is the conditions which you agreed to before. If they were met, you would change your minds. So they basically said, well, look, this is the finish line. Okay, these 20 books I've written. This is the skeptic talking now. These 20 books I've written describe how none of the evidence so far has got anywhere near this little finish line I've set up here. Okay, and you say, right, well, I know this guy's going to change his mind because I have this evidence that does cross that finish line. And when you present it to them, you're thinking, that's it, the skeptic's going to change his mind. What does the skeptic say? No, no, it's not good enough. I'm moving this finish line a little bit further. Or the more appropriate athletic analogy is, I'm raising the bar. That's the athletic metaphor most people use. Either way, you understand the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that I don't know about Shermer specifically, but many skeptics are ideological zealots who will never change their mind no matter what. I think some of the backslappers are as well, but the backslappers are a separate category from the skeptics. You know, you could take Mick West to a pub. All right, sit him down. An alien walks in, shakes his hand with his little 3-fingered hand, and drinks a pint of Martian beer, and he and Mick West have a discussion. And he says, look, here's my fingerprints, here's my DNA, you can take away and decent test them. What will Mick West's response be to that? Probably it'll be, that was just a guy in a suit. That's a puppet. If a UFO landed on the White House lawn, what would the skeptics say? It's a bouncy castle. Joe Biden's grandkids are having a party. Some skeptics will never change their mind, no matter what evidence you put in front of them. Some will. I think some will. I think that I said Mick West would. Maybe Mick West is a bad example. I think he's a bit more honest than that. Professor Simon Holland is already trying to change his mind, and he's sneakily moving up the starting grid. As I explained before, I've talked about Professor Simon Holland before. Sam Harris is being a lot more mature and honest, and he's actually simply saying, yeah, it looks like we're going to have to apologize to the people we've been laughing at for 50 years. So that's it, guys. Unexpected update. A surprising amount of material here. 2 hours, 20 bloody minutes. So I'd like to say that my next video will be a comments reply. It will be another subject. I do have a lot of other videos I want to make. I've got a list of about 4 or 5 that I could do within the next week. But, you know, maybe there'll be another update on David Grusch. I mean, I'm honestly hoping, actually, that the David Grusch thing takes a moment to pause now, just so I can catch up a little bit. I'd like to see. I want to see more progress on the David Grusch thing. But if we get a couple of days off, I wouldn't object to that. I'm getting a bit of David Grusch fatigue, actually. But if we don't get that day off, of course, I've got to admit, it will be a good thing, and I will be the first person to. I'll be the first person to do my duty and report on it, which I will do on this channel, or indeed on the Hapanwo Voice blog. I've already raised some of the points I've made in this video on the Hapanwo Voice blog, so check that out. But yeah, I'll be back very soon. Thank you all of you for watching Hapanwo TV. Hospital Port as pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order.